They counted the days in knots of rawhide. One cord, one rebellion, and the only land in North America ever truly taken back from an empire. New Mexico, 1680. For 80 years it had been a mission colony, a kingdom of dust ruled by the cross. The conquistadors had come for gold. They left empty-handed, but the priests stayed. It had begun with Don Juan de Oñate. At Acoma, he ruled by terror, severing feet, sentencing children to servitude. Even Spain recoiled. Yet the colony he founded survived, and the cruelty he planted only deepened. The Kachina dances, the heartbeat of Pueblo faith, were branded idolatry, devil worship. The friars burned the masks, smashed the prayer sticks, sealed the sacred kivas. They meant to erase a people's gods. Resistance had a price: whipping, imprisonment, death. To pray as your fathers prayed was a crime. The lash became the law of God in New Mexico. Then came the hunger. Drought cracked the fields, famine hollowed the villages, the rains failed, and the corn, sacred, life-giving corn, withered in the dust. And the ships of Europe carried more than crosses: smallpox, measles, diseases with no name in the Pueblo tongue. Whole clans melted away. The population collapsed by the tens of thousands. Still the demands came: labor for Spanish fields, tribute in corn, in cotton, in hides. The Pueblos starved, while their harvests were carried away. The colony fed itself on their backs. Beneath the surface, the old faith never died. In secret kivas, by candle and cornmeal, the Pueblos still danced for rain. Two worlds shared one land, and only one could rule the spirit. 1675. The Spanish struck at the soul of the resistance. 47 Pueblo medicine men, keepers of the old ways, were arrested. The charge: sorcery. The verdict was meant to break them. One man was hanged. 3 more were driven to take their own lives in despair. The rest were sentenced to the lash. Among the whipped was a Tewa man from San Juan Pueblo. His name was Pope. Stripped, bound, and beaten before his own people, the Spanish meant to humiliate him. Instead, they forged a weapon. But the Pueblos were not yet broken. 70 warriors marched on Santa Fe and demanded their holy men freed. The governor, fearing revolt, relented. Pope walked free, carrying 80 years of rage. Pope vanished north to the most defiant of all Pueblos, Taos, beyond the reach of Spanish eyes. There, in the shadow of the mountains, he began to dream of the unthinkable, a war of all the Pueblos as one. In the secret kivas, Pope spoke. He claimed 3 spirit messengers had come to him from the underworld, commanding the Pueblos to rise. The old gods, he said, demanded the Spanish be driven into the sea. It had never been done. Dozens of Pueblos, speaking different languages: Tewa, Tewa, Keres, Toa, Zuni, Hopi, scattered across hundreds of miles. Pope would weld them into a single fist. Secrecy was everything. Pope trusted no one fully, not even his own son-in-law, whom he came to suspect of treachery. One whisper to the Spanish, and the whole rebellion would hang. Then came his masterstroke, a cord of yucca fiber tied with knots. Each knot, one day, untie one knot at each dawn. When the last knot fell, every Pueblo would strike at once. 2 runners, Katua and Omtua, carried the cords from village to village, across mesas and canyons, swift and silent. Each headman received his cord and the deadly arithmetic of the knots. The target was set, the 13th of August. When the last knot was untied, the Pueblo world would explode together. leaving the scattered Spanish no time to gather, no time to warn each other. But the plot leaked. Spanish soldiers seized the runners Tewa and Tewa. Under interrogation, the secret spilled. Governor Otermin now knew a storm was coming. Pope did not panic. He struck early. Word flew out to every Pueblo. Rise now. The revolt would begin on the 10th of August, 3 days before the Spanish expected the blow. August 10th, 1680, across hundreds of miles in dozens of villages, the Pueblo people rose as one. The largest, most successful uprising against a European power in the history of North America had begun. The targets were the missions. 21 Franciscan friars, the men who had burned the masks and wielded the lash, were struck down at their altars. The churches burned. The bells went silent. Pope ordered the baptisms washed away. Men scrubbed their bodies with yucca suds in the rivers, unmaking the Spanish sacrament. They cast off Christian names. They reclaimed their own. On the scattered ranches, there was no warning. Over 400 Spanish settlers, farmers, women, children, soldiers were killed in the first days. The survivors fled, terrified, toward the only refuge left. Survivors streamed in from every direction, from the river settlements, from the south. They crowded behind the mud walls of one place, Governor Otermin's last stand, the capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe. By mid-August, the Pueblo army surrounded the capital. Hundreds, then thousands of warriors filled the hills. Inside the walls, 1,000 Spanish soldiers and refugees alike stared out at the end of their world. The Pueblos sent a brutal ultimatum: 2 crosses. The white cross meant surrender and leave. The red cross meant fight and die. Pope's people offered the Spanish the same mercy Spain had shown. None. Then, Pope's warriors found the city's weakness, the water. They dammed the acequia that fed Santa Fe. Behind the walls, 1,000 people and their animals began to thirst. For 9 days, the siege ground on. Fire arrows rained into the plaza. The chapel burned. The Spanish, parched and surrounded, knew the truth. They could not hold. The empire in New Mexico was dying of thirst. On August 21st, Otermin gambled. He flung his last horsemen out of the gates in a desperate sortie. They cut through the lines, scattering the besiegers, buying not victory, but a single chance to run. And so they fled. 1,000 survivors on foot and in carts, abandoning the capital. South along the river, the long, broken column crawled toward El Paso. After 80 years, Spain was leaving New Mexico. The Pueblos let them go. They watched the conquerors crawl into the distance. They did not need to pursue. The land was theirs again. The cross was uprooted. The shadow had lifted. In the silence that followed, the kivas reopened. The masks were carved anew. For the first time in 2 generations, the Kachina danced freely under the open sky. A people had taken back their gods. It was total. No other native people on the continent ever drove a European empire out so completely. Pope had done the impossible. He had united the Pueblos and won. But power has its own poison. The hero who broke one tyranny began to build another. Pope demanded obedience, tribute, control. The liberator was becoming the very thing he had overthrown. For 12 years, the Pueblo people lived free on their own land. 12 years of their own dances, their own laws, their own dawn. It was the longest breath of freedom the Southwest would ever know. But empires have long memories. Far to the south, in El Paso, the Spanish waited and watched. The conquistador's shadow had only been lifted. It had not vanished. and it was already turning north again. Pope won the only true victory the Pueblos would ever have. 12 years of freedom, counted out in knots of rawhide. Next time, on How the West Was Won. The Empire strikes back, and Don Diego de Vargas marches north to take New Mexico again.